I'm Dale Smith for Carney Politics, and over the past week, the conservative line of attack has been that the government has not produced a budget. They are still releasing the estimates. Those estimates are higher than government spending was last year, and therefore Mark Carney has lost control, and he apparently doesn't know how to run a government, and so on. The problem is that most of this is based on absolutely false and specious assumptions. The budget is a political document. The estimates are the government's spending commitments that have been made over the past year, and the two are not mutually exclusive. You can have the estimates without having a budget. That tends to be how things work most of the time under the current supply cycle in the House of Commons. And the budget doesn't dictate what is in the estimates for the current year. It tends to dictate what is in them for the future years. And this is part of what they are expecting people not to know. So in other words, they're rage baiting because they don't expect people to understand how the estimate cycle works, and therefore it makes it easier for them to drum up outrage, which they can then use for their own social media or fundraising purposes. So what tends to happen with the estimate cycle is that after the budget's released, the departments go through and figure out what they're going to need to accomplish what's in the budget, and they submit what are known as Treasury Board submissions to Treasury Board, which then creates the master fiscal plan for what gets allocated to departments and agencies, as well as transfer payments to provinces, because those are also obligations that are within those spending estimates. And what tends to happen is that the main estimates come out at the end of the fiscal year, which is the end of March. Those are largely based on last year's numbers, because usually the federal budget hasn't been released yet. And then when the budget's released, there are 2 or 3 other supplementary estimate cycles throughout the year, which then allocate more money to align the budget with what was in the current year's budget, or the estimate cycle with what was in the current year budget. And then when the next year's main estimates come out, it is again based on the previous year's budget numbers. So it's a convoluted cycle, but it does have its problems. Let's not make any mistake or assumptions there. The Liberals did actually try and fail to realign the budget and supply cycles when Scott Bryson was Treasury Board president. It didn't end up working out, and so here we are. Suffice to say, the line of attack that the Conservatives are using is bogus. And the problem is that the government could very easily explain these things. They could take 2-3 minutes to explain how this works in order to show that the Conservatives are lying and, essentially acting in bad faith. But they won't do that. They're spending all their time patting themselves in the back for their tax cut instead. And this just goes back to the problems with government communications that have been inherent since the Trudeau era. Instead of actually dealing with disinformation, they are simply choosing to do the happy clappy, pat ourselves in the back for the good stuff we're doing. And, people are none the wiser and, getting increasingly angry because they're being fed this rage bait. No one is coming out shining here, and it's a real problem that everyone should be taking a hand in solving. For Carney Politics, I'm Dale Smith.